Welcome to Henry George Daily Devotion, episode 67. George writes here in chapter 2, The Injustice of Private Property and Land of Book VII, The Justice of the Remedy, in his book, Progress and Poverty, an Inquiry into Industrial... Don't even remember the name of the book that I'm reading. Progress in Poverty, an Inquiry. Where? An inquiry into the cause of industrial depressions and of increase of want with increase of wealth, the remedy. Crazy, the double colon. We gotta remember that better. Alright. We're talking about why owning land as though it were private property is unjust. Because justice and wisdom go hand in hand, and if the remedy to industrial depression and increase of want with increase of wealth is not just, then it cannot be the solution, the remedy. And if it is unjust, then definitely it's not the remedy. George writes, what most prevents... We are recording. The realization of the injustice of private property in land is the habit of including all the things that are made the subject of ownership in one category as property, or, if any distinction is made drawing the line, according to the unphilosophical distinction of the lawyers, between personal property and real estate, or things movable and things immovable. The real and natural distinction is between things which are the produce of labor and things which are the gratuitous offerings of nature, or to adopt the terms of political economy, between wealth and land. Yes, this concept of real estate and movability are not the way we should consider this. I heard yesterday in a Georgist lecture that I can't quite remember the way in which Henry George made fun of the people who wanted to use the term economics instead of political economy. He made fun of them. It was kind of funny. George continues, these two classes of things are in essence relations widely different, and to class them together as property is to confuse all thought when we come to consider the justice or the injustice, the right or the wrong of property. A house and the lot on which it stands are alike property as being the subject of ownership, and are alike classed by the lawyers as real estate. Yet in nature and relations they differ widely. The one is produced by human labor. Raise your hand if you think which one is produced by human labor. Now put your hand down. And belongs to the class in political economy styled wealth. The other is a part of nature and belongs to the class in political economy styled land, the lot on which it stands. The essential character of the one class of things is that they embody labor. They are brought into being by human exertion. Their existence or non-existence, their increase or diminution depending on man. The essential character of the other class of things is that they do not embody labor, and exist irrespective of human exertion and irrespective of man. They are the field or environment in which man finds himself, the storehouse from which his needs must be supplied, the raw material upon which the forces with which alone his labor can act. Yeah, it's the stuff that we got. It's our starting conditions. The moment this distinction is realized, that moment is it seen that the sanction which natural justice gives to one species of property is denied to the other, that the rightfulness which attaches to individual property in the produce of labor implies the wrongfulness of individual property in land. That whereas the recognition of the one places all men upon equal terms, securing to each the due reward of his labor, the recognition of the other is the denial of the equal rights of men, permitting those who do not labor to take the natural reward of those who do. We should all be considered equal inheritors of the earth. Whatever may be said for the institution of private property in land, it is therefore plain that it cannot be defended on the score of justice. The equal right of all men to the use of land is as clear as their equal right to breathe the air. It is a right proclaimed by the fact of their existence, for we cannot suppose that some men have a right to be in this world and others no right. If we are all here by the equal permission of the Creator, we are all here with an equal title to the enjoyment of His bounty, with an equal right to the use of all that nature so impartially offers. Ooh, this is a big footnote. Wow. George's footnote says, in saying that private property in land can, in the ultimate analysis, be justified only on the theory that some men have a better right to existence than others, I am stating only what the advocates of the existing system have themselves perceived. What gave to Malthus his popularity among the ruling classes, what caused his illogical book to be received as a new revelation, induced sovereigns to send him decorations, and the meanest rich man in England to propose to give him a living, was the fact that he furnished a plausible reason for the assumption that some have a better right to existence than others. Well, today I learned that Malthus was very popular with rich people and they gave him a bunch of money. And George is saying this is because, according to Malthusian doctrine, he was able to soothe their guilty consciences. George continues. He furnished a plausible reason for the that some have a better right to existence than others. Well, it was an assumption that some have a better right to the existence than others, an assumption which is necessary for the justification of private property in land, and which Malthus clearly states in the Declaration that the tendency of population is constantly to bring into the world human beings for whom nature refuses to provide, and who consequently, quote, have not the slightest right to any share in the existing store of the necessaries of life, end quote, whom she tells as interlopers to be gone. I don't know what's going on with these quotation marks. There's 3 of them. 4 of them. I guess the whom she tells her interlopers to be gone is George talking again? I don't know. And then, and does not hesitate to extort by force obedience to her mandates, employing for that purpose hunger and pestilence, war and crime, mortality and neglect of infantine life, prostitution and syphilis. And today this Malthusian doctrine is the ultimate defense upon which those who justify private property in land fall back. In no other way can it be logically defended. Yeah. Malthusian doctrine, overpopulation, justice. Back to the main text after we completed the footnote. George writes, "This is a right which is natural and inalienable." That would be what he said in the preceding sentence, that we are all here with an equal title to the enjoyment of his bounty. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't read George's other books. I've read this, and I don't recall him anywhere in this so far or later in this reading if he explicitly speaks about immigration. There's sometimes a concern among people hearing about Georgism about, everyone is just going to move into the land that has a citizen's dividend and claim it. I think overall Georgists are very pro-immigration, because they believe that with each new laborer, each pair of hands, more production can be got than on average than is consumed on average. So there's the simple efficiency argument, and then of course they also think any human on Earth has as much of a claim to the land I'm on as I have to the land that I'm on. If I've built things there and I have a bunch of stuff there, they're not entitled to that, and they're not entitled to kick me off it unless they're going to compensate me and continue to compensate the rest of society for that exclusive use. And then, of course, determining functionally how often and when or how pieces of land that have that come with exclusive access rights for some finite amount of time, like how often would these pieces of land go up for auction. These are the things which Georgists argue a lot about in terms of policy implementation details, but ultimately I believe immigration is entirely welcome, but I don't know if George speaking specifically about these things. Like there is a concern that, I don't know, like people like move into it. Yeah, if we like implement Georgism piecemeal and some states have it and some others don't, that people like live one place, work another, or own in another place and work, I don't know. Anyway, George continues. Alright, so this is a right, natural and inalienable, that we all have an equal title to the enjoyment of his bounty. It is a right which vests in every human being as he enters the world, and which during his continuance in the world can be limited only by the equal rights of others. There is in nature no such thing as a fee simple in land. Yeah, this is a concept used by the maximum interest in the property being unqualified or of indefinite duration, freely transferable and inheritable. Unqualified, indefinite duration. It's weird to say maximum interest. I think, the easy way of understanding fee simple, Fee simple or fee simple absolute is an estate in land, a form of freehold ownership. A fee is a vested, inheritable, possessory interest in land. Just means, colloquially, I would say, you can buy land and you just own it and have exclusive right to it and no one else does forever and ever until you decide to sell it or trade it. George continues, there is on earth no power which can rightfully make a grant of exclusive ownership in land. If all existing men were to unite to grant away their equal rights, they could not grant away the right of those who follow them. For what are we but tenants for a day? Have we made the earth that we should determine the rights of those who after us shall tenant it in their turn? Yeah, that's a funny joke. What if, yeah, like if, yeah, we have this idea that as soon as you die, everything you own is, like, you're dead. So everything you own, like, you don't, like, you cease to be able to own once you're dead. But you are able to transfer it. Anyway. Yeah, it's funny to think of all this stuff here. Like, if I make something and I want to be the only person that ever uses it, I, like, have to destroy it by the time I die. There's no way you can just say, like, oh, after I'm dead, no one can use this, and that people would ever acknowledge that. I don't know. It's kind of random. If all exists, for what are we but tenants for a day? Have we made the earth that we should determine the rights of those who after us shall tenant it in their turn? The Almighty, who created the earth for man, and man for the earth, has entailed it upon all the generations of the children of men by a decree written upon the constitution of all things, a decree which no human action can bar and no prescription determine. Let the parchments be ever so many, or possession ever so long, natural justice can recognize no right in one man to the possession and enjoyment of land that is not equally the right of all his fellows, though his titles have been acquiesced in by generation after generation, to the landed estates of the Duke of Westminster, to the poorest child that is born in London today, has as much right as has his eldest son. Footnote. The natural and inalienable right to the equal use and enjoyment of land is so apparent that it has been recognized by men wherever force or habit has not blunted first perceptions. To give but one instance, the white settlers of New Zealand found themselves unable to get from the Maoris what the latter considered a complete title to land, because, although a whole tribe might have consented to a sale, they would still claim with every new child born among them an additional payment, on the ground that they had parted with only their own rights, and could not sell those of the unborn. The government was obliged to step in and settle the matter by buying land for a tribal annuity, in which every child that is born acquires a share. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. Or I had forgotten that. I forgot all this. It's funny. Though the sovereign people of the state of New York consent to the landed possessions of the Astors, the puniest infant that comes wailing into the world in the squalidest room of the most miserable tenement house becomes at that moment seized of an equal right with the millionaires, and it is robbed if the right is denied. Our previous conclusions, irresistible in themselves, thus stand approved by the highest and final test, translated from terms of political economy. This is a long chapter. Into terms of ethics, they show a wrong as the source of the evils which increase as material progress goes on. The masses of men who in the midst of abundance suffer want, who clothed with political freedom are condemned to the wages of slavery, to whose toll labor-saving inventions bring no relief, but rather seem to rob them of a privilege, instinctively feel that there is something wrong and they are right. The wide-spreading social evils which everywhere oppress men amid an advancing civilization spring from a great primary wrong, the appropriation as the exclusive property of some men of the land on which and from which all must live. From this fundamental injustice flow all the injustices which distort and endanger modern development, which condemn the producer of wealth to poverty and pamper the non-producer in luxury, which rear the tenement house with the palace, plant the brothel behind the church, and compel us to build prisons as we open new schools. Henry George was born in 1839. Did he... I mean, he would have been like, 26-ish during the start of the Civil War. I don't know if did he fight in the Civil War? The New York Sun wrote that since the Civil War, few announcements have been more startling than that of the sudden death of Henry George. Flags replace a hat, yeah. Commenters disagreed on whether it was the largest funeral in New York or the largest since the death of Abraham Lincoln. The New York Times wrote, not even Lincoln had a more glorious death. I've read this before, and it's just wild to me that he was so popular, and I'd never heard of him, and basically no one has heard of him. Like, Google Trends. Henry George. Oh. I guess since... That's funny. Henry versus land value tax. For those listening and not watching, which is like maybe one person, we are looking at Google Trends for... we searched Henry George, and he had been searched a fair amount in 2004, which is when Google Trends started, and it was like kind of a weird... Like it was sort of consistently popular over time since 2004 till now for Henry George. Georgism looks like the first search is... There's some weird spike in like 2008. And then there are a few other spikes between 2010 and 2016. And at 2016 it started becoming more common and popping up more. The term Georgism. Although Henry George itself was... I don't know. I definitely know that I had never heard of him, and everyone I've ever talked to, maybe one person out of the 100+ people I've talked to about Georgism had heard of him before. But they weren't exactly sure. They'd like heard the name, maybe. Actually, maybe two people. There was a philosophy student I knew. I'll continue. But I know like a dozen philosophy students, and that was the only one of them I'd heard of him. There is nothing strange or inexplicable in the phenomena that are now perplexing the world. It is not that material progress is not in itself a good. It is not that nature has called into being children for whom she has failed to provide. It is not that the Creator has left on natural laws a taint of injustice at which even the human mind revolts. That material progress brings such bitter fruits. that amid our highest civilization men faint and die with want, is not due to the niggardliness of nature, but to the injustice of man. Vice and misery, poverty and pauperism are not the legitimate results of increase of population and industrial development. They only follow increase of population and industrial development because land is treated as private property. They are the direct and necessary results of the violation of the supreme law of justice involved in giving to some men the exclusive possession of that which nature provides for all men. It's like we're all playing King of the Hill and pretending that the winners actually get to keep the hill. The recognition of individual proprietorship of land is the denial of the natural rights of other individuals. It is a wrong which must show itself in the inequitable division of wealth, for as labor cannot produce without the use of land, the denial of the equal right to the use of land is necessarily the denial of the right of labor to its own produce. Yeah, if you can't have land, then you can't have the wages of your labor. We already decided that you own your labor because you own yourself. If one man can command the land upon which others must labor, he can appropriate the produce of their labor as the price of his permission to labor. I saw on a Georgist video this opening quote, which is, if you have all the money in the world and I own all the land in the world, how much will I charge you for one night of rent? And then it faded out. And you know, if I owned all the land in the world and you had all the money in the world, I would probably charge you all the money in the world for one night of rent, in case you weren't sure what I would do. But I wouldn't do that because I believe that that is unjust. I would try to be just. Anyway, the fundamental law of nature, that her enjoyment by man shall be consequent upon his exertion, is thus violated. The one receives without producing, the others produce without receiving. The one is unjustly enriched. This is the landlord receives without producing, the laborers produce without receiving. The landlord is unjustly enriched, the laborers are robbed. To this fundamental wrong we have traced the unjust distribution of wealth, which is separating modern society into the very rich and the 99%. It is the continuous increase of rent, the price that labor is compelled to pay for the use of land. Again, there's greater and lesser amounts of landlordism in individuals in our current society. Because, you can go out and own a bunch of land out in the desert and be the lord of that land, and that is unjust. Like, we all should have an equal right and share of desert land, but nobody cares that much. And then it is a spectrum from there to the absolute best land in the heart of Manhattan or the heart of Los Angeles. And I don't want all of you, low-tier landlords, as I'll call you, people in the suburbs who own like one house, probably have a big mortgage on it and paying a bunch of rent, or not rent, but something, we don't call it rent, but in a political economy term, paying rent essentially to banks. You don't have to fully lump yourselves in here with the landlords. Just a little bit of yourself. And it's very likely when we learn George's remedy, you would still maintain exclusive right to your land so long as you continue to compensate the rest of society at a rate probably about what you've already been doing via other taxation. Uh, but it does depend where on that spectrum of landlording you are, how good your land, how big your land, and how good your land actually is, and how much it would benefit the rest of society if you were to share it or give it up to other people. How much benefit they would get from that. George continues, it is the continuous increase of rent, the price that labor is compelled to pay for the use of land, which strips the many of the wealthy they justly earn. That strips many of the wealth they justly earn, to pile it up in the hands of the few who do nothing to earn it. Why should they who suffer from this injustice hesitate for one moment to sweep it away? Who are the landholders that they should be thus permitted to reap where they have not sown? Consider for a moment the utter absurdity of the titles by which we permit to be gravely passed from John Doe to Richard Roe. I don't know, is that supposed to be Richard Doe? The right exclusively to possess the earth, giving absolute dominion as against all others. In California, our land titles go back to the supreme government of Mexico, who took from the Spanish king, who took from the Pope, when he, by a stroke of the pen, divided lands yet to be discovered between the Spanish or Portuguese, or, if you please, they rest upon conquest. In the Eastern States, they go back to treaties with Indians and grants from English kings. In Louisiana, to the government of France, in Florida to the government of Spain, while in England they go back to the Norman conquerors. Everywhere, not to a right which obliges, but to a force which compels. And when a title rests but on force, no complaint can be made when force annuls it. Whenever the people, having the power, choose to annul those titles, no objection can be made in the name of justice. There have existed men who had the power to hold or to give exclusive possession of portions of the earth's surface, but when and where did there exist the human being who had the right? We're gonna stir up some rebellion and sedition here. I know I've been going slow. I think maybe I'll stop here. Thanks for listening. See you next time.